He was a big guy. And they had him up against it. And I guess they were a little rough with him, and he had temper. And I never forget him saying, the American Servicemen's Union got to get you for this. Don't you forget it. And I thought, damn, we're everywhere, man. There's a lot of us, you know. Anyway, they took us in, and I immediately was put in segregation. The conditions were really, really bad. And the overcrowding, the racism, the ill treatment of prisoners by the guards and by many of the guards just really contributed to a really kind of, I was going to say unpleasant experience. It was a horrific experience. It was terrible. Something happened on a particular day, and that was a prisoner was beaten up. He was grabbed, and he was a pretty popular guy. He was a real good guy. And, you know, he was stubborn. He had some guts. He'd stand up to him, you know, which was cool. It made him real popular. And a couple of guards grabbed him in the middle of the compound, in front of everybody, man. I mean, we're all looking out and watching it. And they physically restrained him, and they beat him and dragged him off to segregation. I mean, there were a lot of us that were seething already, and the place was like teeming. It was just starting to boil. And you could feel it, and I knew it. But that was the spark. It just kind of spontaneously, well, for the most part, spontaneously, went off, and there was a rebellion at the Fort Dick Stockade on June 5th, 1969. We took over some of the cell blocks. Some of them were burned. There was some damage done in others, and some defensive fighting going on there. They surrounded us that night with shotguns, fire hoses, and shotguns, and they had the whole stockade surrounded. And you could see the cigarette butts out there, man. You know, in the dark, and you knew how many of them there were. I mean, I don't know how many, but there were like a lot because Fort Dick Stockade was huge.
So this took place all in one night?
All in one night, yeah. And so we surrendered. I remember they got us all to one kind of small area. You know, we were packed in there. We were just sitting in the ground at night. And I went around telling people, you know, so I thought, okay. And the elation was worn off a bit, and now people are going to start getting scared. And I went around telling people, just don't say anything. You don't have to say anything. Just deny it. And they can't do anything if you keep your mouth shut. And this one guy, I hardly knew him. I mean, I don't think I knew him that well at all. He just came up to me, and he said, Terry, sit down. He said, it's the name of the last man that goes around. They're going to remember. And they finally pulled me in. And they had 2 or 3 agents, and they offered me a cigarette and a sandwich and stuff. And I'm looking around, and he said, listen, we really don't need anything from you. We don't need a statement by you. We have 45 signed witnesses that have signed statements against you, and you're going to jail for the rest of your life. Boy, was I scared. I mean, I was terrified. People were scared. They were scared of me, and they were scared of being around me. They you know, felt that I felt for the first time like a leper, you know. I'd contaminate someone, and understandably, people were very afraid. And at that point, or at some point, they took me and out of there and took me back into segregation and into solitary. I ended up along with. There were 37 of us, I believe, that were charged, and 5 of us were charged with major crimes. They charged us with, to the best of my memory, conspiracy to riot, destruction of government property, aggravated arson.
Conspiracy to arson.
Conspiracy to arson?
Yeah, there was a conspiracy practically going on to every other charge.
But I faced at that time 56 and a half years. And I thought, they got me, man. So, I mean, I immediately appealed to yo, Andy, get me the hell out of here, you know, do something. And so the ASU and Youth Against War and Fascism and other organizations really swung in with lawyers, with publicity, with demonstrations. They made this into a national case. It's what really saved our lives.
The women's demonstration at the base of 7,000 women.
Yes, that's right.
You were.
I loved them all. I mean, I just loved everybody that came to any of those demonstrations, you know. that, because I knew the more publicity we had, the more exposure we had, the safer we were. And the safer we were from getting our asses beat up, in the jury, they were all officers. But by now, this is 1969, some of these young officers were being affected by what had happened what was going on in the anti-war movement. Every time they started mentioning violence, the prosecutor would mention something about, and then they went and burnt one of them nudged the other one, and they kind of smiled and stuff. I'm thinking, damn, it looks kind of sympathetic. I was young, but I'll tell you what, I was fighting for my life, man. I thought, geez, you start doing the math, and I thought 30, 31 years old, and of course 30 back then was an old age, I thought I'm going to be with, I'm a middle-aged guy by the time I get out of this place. I don't need this, And so we went back in, and I was found not guilty of all charges. And I just couldn't believe it. They kept reading aggravated arson, conspiracy to riot, and it kept saying not guilty. I couldn't believe it. I was astounded.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here in a little bit. I want to take some questions, everything. I also want to make an appeal for you to donate to the available address. Root Bird of Freedom is free. I'm just kidding, but we know freedom isn't free. Right? Got to fund this thing, put some resources behind it, including monetary and whatnot. A couple more points I want to make, and then we're going to go ahead and take some questions. One of the things that I get, I'm just trying to make sure I make some points that, I'm one of these kind of people, when I get ready to give a talk, I make all these notes about what I want to say. I think it's the first time I look at my notes the whole time. I cover most of it, though. One of the questions that I get all the time is, what can I do as a actual civilian that's not in the armed forces to support what you guys are doing? Number one, I think, one of the ways that they did it in the Vietnam conflict, though that was probably a little different today, based upon, the structure of the military. Back then, most of the enlisted guys actually lived on the base, whereas where I work, most of the guys live off the base. They're able to do that because of something called BAH, basic house allowance, that you get if you actually marry. These guys be rushing to get married. I'm not saying that they do so. I'm not saying that they do so strictly for the BAH, but let's face it. I mean, economically, would you want to live on that carry? That carry is a nice to live on. I tell you that. But at any rate, I saw her nod her head because she lived in Norfolk for a while, so she knows exactly what I'm talking about. But at that time, it was called the GI Coffee House movement. Okay, and the Certain No Certain DVD, which I would encourage all of you to get a copy of it, get a chance. I used to bring a whole stack of these and sell them and things like this, but I just didn't have enough room to bring all those. But I would encourage you to get it. It chronicles that entire movement, and it deals with that GI Coffee House movement, and how civilians were able to use that GI Coffee House movement to support the activities of the GI movement within the ranks. One of the more famous ones was in Fort Hood, Texas. It was known as the OEO Strut. Okay, it deals with a lot of the activism down there. In fact, I was one of the veteran members of the OEO Strut, a guy named David Klein, who was very active in the peace and justice movement. He and I built a pretty good relationship over time. So, long term? What are we looking to do? In this book here, written by David Courtwright, this is what he proposed in 1975. It's interesting because 31 years later, we have yet to really implement it. What would it feel like if we actually implemented this? Number one, David is an advocate, and still is, of what he calls radicals, certain few of them, not all, okay, but a few, His thing is, what if we could get 10 to 20 supposed radicals? A radical within the military context is someone that has a very questioning attitude. So, just a questioning attitude. Someone wants to raise issues of human rights and just dignity from time to time. That's a radical. If a few of them, purposely join the army, join the services. Now that's not in lieu of the actual activism that people are doing, such as counter recruiting and those sort of activities. I support those activities. But I think we got to be. I'm practical in the sense that I understand that with those activities, and even though we're seeing a drop in military recruitment, particularly in certain communities, there's still going to be a host of folks that are still going to join the military.